Up next, Authentically Detroit returns from winter break, and we're discussing the year ahead. What's in store for Detroit, the state of Michigan, and most importantly, our listeners. But first, this week's hot takes from Bridge Detroit. Here's who MDOT seated to advise on I-375 project in Detroit, and youth homelessness, an invisible crisis in plain sight, providers say. Keep it locked. Authentically Detroit starts after these messages.
Founded in 2021, the Stoudemire is a membership-based community recreation and wellness center centrally located on the east side of Detroit. Membership in the Stoudemire is available on a sliding scale for up to $20 per year or 20 hours of volunteer time. The Stoudemire offers art, dance, and fitness classes, community meetings and events, resource fairs, pop-up events, the neighborhood tech hub, and more. Members who are residents of the east side have access to exclusive services in the Wellness Network. Join today and live well, play well, be well. Visit ecndetroit.org.
Bridge Detroit is your news and engagement platform that is telling the stories of Detroiters rooted by community priorities. Started in 2020 by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Stephen Henderson, the newsroom has already established its footing as the go-to source for hyper-local perspectives that ask the hard questions, brings accountability, and searches out real solutions. It's free to become a member of this award-winning news organization. Visit bridgedetroit.com today to sign up to receive the news delivered right to your inbox. Bridge Detroit, by Detroiters, for Detroiters.
Hey, y'all, it's Orlando. We just want to let you know that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast episode are those of the co-hosts and guests and not their sponsoring institutions. Now, let's start the show. Hello, Detroit and the world. Welcome to another episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from the WDET studios. We're a content partner to bridgedetroit.com. I'm Orlando Bailey.
And I'm Donna Givens-Davidson.
Thank you for listening in and supporting our efforts to build a platform of authentic voices for real people in the city of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on all platforms. This week, it's just Donna and I in the studio to kick off the new year. Donna, Happy New Year. How is the new year finding you? It's the third day of 2023.
It is. It's finding me well. I'm feeling good. I had my New Year's resolutions, and one of the New Year's resolutions that I made to myself, a promise I made to myself, is to stop living in the past. You know, sometimes when you lose people, you become tethered to memories, and sometimes the memories are sad memories. And so there's a lot of beautiful things I want to remember, but I'm letting go of hurt, pain, regrets, all of that so that I can embrace new things.
Yeah. How is it so far on the other side of all of that?
That's good.
It's good.
It's good. You know, I have not worked, been to work since December 16th. So
that doesn't even sound like you.
I feel like,
Are you sure?
I know. I feel like I'm in early retirement. What can I say? No, I mean, I've been working, I've been learning, I've been growing, but I have not been physically in the office. And I gave my brain that part of me that worries about how you run an organization every day a rest. So I'm ready to get back into it. I'm working on a proposal that's due at the end of this month and a few other things, but I'm taking it easy this week. And then next week, we're going to have our retreat, a 4-day retreat. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. How was your break?
It was great.
Yeah.
It was great. I went to Niagara on the Lake. Kevin and I decided we were going to do an artist retreat. So he painted and I worked on my novel, and all I can say is he finished what he started, okay? I was so jealous. Even on Christmas, we painted until Christmas. So we were supposed to come home on the Friday beforehand, and there was a winter warning, and we ended up staying 3 extra days. Snowmageddon. And, you know, Snowmageddon in Canada near Niagara Falls was
it's real.
Not much better than it was here. So we said, you know what, let's just be safe. So it was good. How was yours?
Oh man, I had a good break. I spent the last week of the break though trying to recover. I had what I think was a really bad chest cold and a headache, and so I spent really the last week just in the bed trying to recover. thank goodness, I got sick when I didn't have to work. So,
I don't know.
I just wish that I could rest without the pain because it was painful.
Yeah, I know. It's just that, when you get sick and it's your vacation time, then it's sort of like that's stealing my vacation time. This
I know,
illness, right? That's not fair.
It's not fair. So I have to figure something else out in the new year in 2023. I think I'm going to be more intentional with just that, right? Scheduling the joy, scheduling the time off, because misery schedules itself, a wise Black woman once said. So got to schedule that joy.
And you really do, and that's one of my resolutions, right? I've got to schedule joy. But let me ask you a question: do you feel refreshed at all, having been sick?
I feel better. I think I'm glad that I'm just feeling better. I'm also feeling excited about the work that is to come, the things that we have in store here at the podcast, the things that are in store at Bridge Detroit and at just everything that my hands are in. I'm super excited about it. So I do feel refreshed. I do feel like I'm ready to tackle what comes. I'm still holding on to the intention that I set last year around trying to identify and let go of false urgency. Mm-hmm. I saw something today, I think from Charity Dean, talking about urgency, and it was like, it's latching on. You put something into the ether and see what happens. And now, she's talking about that.
Well, and cool. I think she is a braver woman than me. I'm not certain if I read that right. And she left all of her emails, and then she came back and looked at them.
Yeah.
Let's just say I did not.
Yeah.
So I was not confronted by a wave of emails. I was checking them all along because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I caught a few important things along the way. You said something during break that I thought was really interesting and relevant to our work when you were noting Barbara Walters' death.
Yeah.
And her impact on your life. And so I thought listeners might be interested in hearing how she impacted you.
Oh, wow. To have studied broadcast journalism in the 21st century, that means that you have had to study Barbara Walters. Right. And I said that, of course, she is a pioneer and a glass ceiling shatterer for so many women. But she was also an amazing teacher of the craft to anyone who paid attention. And I paid attention. I paid attention specifically to not only how she facilitated discussion, because I love how she facilitates a discussion in a group of people, but the way that she conducts her one-on-one interviews. One of my favorite things to do, literally, is to interview people one-on-one. And I can't give you any other reason other than Barbara Walters.
Yeah, you're so good at it. And, I was just thinking about you, your whole posture and the way you ask the penetrating questions. You have a lot of people. That's an art that people don't always understand, how to ask a really difficult question and not make people want to, slap you or whatever.
Yeah.
You've done that. You have the ability to get at truth without offending the people who are supposed to tell you the truth. Get people to open up and be authentic with you. So I just want to commend you, because when you said that was your role model, I was like, wow, I can see it.
Thank you, Donna. I work hard at it. And I think the key to being a good interviewer are two things. Number one, having an insatiable curiosity about whatever the subject matter is, and being an amazing listener.
I think there's a third one, though.
What's the third one?
I think it's being really interested in the people that you're interviewing.
Oh, for sure.
And showing them that you're really interested in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
More so than what they're talking about. That ability to connect person to person. I see you doing it.
Yeah.
It's a gift.
Well, that's a huge compliment. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I study Barbara Walters. And so I know that this is, a referendum on all of the women who are in broadcast journalism or in media, period, and understand, what you might be feeling at this time, because this titan has passed on. But there are some of us guys too, who learned a heck of a whole lot from this amazing woman.
You've always demonstrated your ability to learn from women. Isn't it interesting that you even have to make that preface? And I'm not saying that as a criticism.
Yeah.
But if a woman learns from a man, that's kind of expected. When a man learns skills from a woman, it's sort of like, ooh, wait a minute. Is that the way it's supposed to happen? And so I really admire the fact and appreciate the fact that you can acknowledge when you've learned from women, because that's really when you have equity in our culture, when learning goes both ways, always up, down, age-wise, income-wise, gender, all of that.
Absolutely. Eat that, Harry Reasoner. And I was raised by Black women. So, boom, there you go. So I learned how to show up from Black women. All right, y'all, it's time for Hot Takes, where we run down some of the week's top headlines in the city of Detroit. Here's who MDOT seated to advise on I-375 project in Detroit. The Michigan Department of Transportation has selected 24 people for a community advisory committee that will advise on transforming Interstate 375 into a street-level boulevard and what should happen with the $50 million worth of land that will be made available, right? So the committee will play a big role in the community benefits aspect of the project, specifically around that $50 million worth of land. There was not a formal application process to join this committee. MDOT coordinated with the Detroit Department of Neighborhoods, that's out of the mayor's office, to get the word out about it to stakeholders along I-375. And the committee, he said, plans to hold monthly in-person meetings. Bridge Detroit had to obtain the list of committee members through a Freedom of Information Act request because we couldn't just get it. And the list is it's interesting to say the least. But Donna, what say you?
Well, I mean, I'm glad they're getting community feedback. And now I think they've clarified what this project is about. It's a development project. For so long they were saying somehow it was reparations or it was supposed to help correct a past injustice. But if the people that you're getting advice from and input from are the people who live nearby, and that's the priority, then certainly those were not the people who were negatively impacted by the original destruction of Black Bottom. If you're trying to figure out a way to repair the past, that list is incomplete. I would never say somebody doesn't belong on the list because that is not my responsibility. But what I will say is you have to balance that by asking people who were harmed. And I'm not just talking about developers because I've heard that there's going to be a fund for developers. I'm talking about folks who lived in houses they lost. There were people who were purchasing homes through land contract, didn't have a deed, lost their home, and they didn't get a dime from the city. All those investments, all of those savings just gone. There were homeowners inside of that community, and there were also people who had stability in there. When you look at what's lost in a community, it's not just housing. It could be the church you go to. It could be the community center. It could be the bowling alley, the record shop. It could be your children's school. And when all of that is just wiped off the map, the harm is irreparable in many ways. There's a scar that's there, and it has happened to community after community after community that Black people have developed. 100 years later, or not 100 years, 70 years later, now some of us are saying, well, Black people need to learn how to start businesses. We need to learn how to do things. We've done these things. We had Black Wall Street. We were doing a lot of things in city after city in America. And then when things get torn down, it's like, well, you have to figure out how to do it all over again. So it's clear what the project is. And I think given that scope, it's fine. But I don't want to hear another word about reparations.
I'm really unsure of whether or not this scope has any real teeth, right? And transparency. The article highlights that there was no open application process. It says that the mayor's office sent, a listicle of block club presidents and names of people who reside in the impact area. And whatever that application process was from MDOT, we don't know what it looked like and how people got on there. So I'm not enthusiastic about that. But the other piece about this that I'm really not enthusiastic about is is this more of the same? I mean, we've seen so many development projects come and go and get complete here in the city of Detroit with advisory committees that consist of residents and nonprofit practitioners, if they are allowed, and other kinds of stakeholders that really looks ceremonial to me. It doesn't. You
mean like the Community Advisory Committee for the Chrysler expansion.
Yeah,
where committee members are now saying, why do we have 3 weeks to decide and no real input?
No real input, ceremonial, sort of to satisfy, if there is a squeaky wheel, the squeaky wheel that exists. And I'm tired of this kind of representation. Right. And I don't think residents and people should go for this. There needs to be some sort of committee charge that has actionable steps and teeth that are enforceable. And I'm not seeing that here. So I'm not enthusiastic about whatever they may come up with.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that whatever they come up with is going to be something that benefits them. And if, I don't know how many block clubs border I-375. I'm sure there's a couple. I didn't see Katrina Watkins' name. I have to look again and see if I see McDougal Hunt residents on that list. So I don't see anybody in close communities. As you know, my mother lived, and we still are, dealing with her house on St. Aubin, which is not far from there. I know that Doris Rhea and Walter Rhea live in the that area, and just across them, and you do have Terry Campbell. Now she is on the list, and Terry is, as you know, the she's
constituent services for Debbie
constituent
Stabenow.
Services for Debbie Stabenow. But Doris Rhea lives right next to her. And she's certainly been a longstanding leader in the city of Detroit with knowledge of things. And even still, I think that a more diverse group would actually help arrive at justice. I want to go back to what you said about ceremonial, because with the community benefits, and this is not community benefits. Community benefits is a city of Detroit process. This is an MDOT process that was informed by the city of Detroit Department of Neighborhoods. And the Department of Neighborhoods, there's some good people who work for the Department of Neighborhoods, but these are mayoral appointees. And so there is a political edge to their involvement in communities, whether or not it's, electoral or not. These are his representatives that get called on for various things. But when you talk about the Community Advisory Committee, the most insulting thing of the whole process was when they reached an agreement and it went before council. And the mayor's people advised city council that they could not overrule this ceremonial process, meaning that the city council lost its voice and the people who voted for city council members lost their representation. And so I think that there are some aspects of democracy that go deeper than even just the fact that you are just giving a surface treatment. When one unit of government is able to usurp the power of the others by way of a community benefits process, which was really supposed to, when it was originally designed, increase the power of the constituents. And it did the opposite.
Proposal A and Proposal B.
Proposal B, yes. I mean, but they said, okay, we've got a different proposal. We'll politicize it, we'll use it in such a way that city council loses its voice. And I don't think that's what the people meant. I think what the people meant was that they wanted city council to be informed by the community's opinions and to have to listen to the community. But to say you have to accept this lock, stock, and barrel because these 7 people appointed by elected officials and 2 people who were elected by the community decided on this process in 3 weeks is just unjustifiable. And I know this is the shortest.
That was a slap in the face.
A slap in the face.
It really is, and it's offensive.
Yeah,
it's an offensive process. Listen, we have to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about youth homelessness as an invisible crisis in plain sight. An article written by Nusrat Rahman in Bridge Detroit. Keep it locked. Authentically Detroit. We'll be right back.
Have you always dreamed of being on the airwaves? Well, the Detroit Eastside Engaged Podcast Network, or DEEP for short, is here to make that dream a reality. Located inside the Stoudemire, the DEEP Network offers studio space and production staff to help get your podcast idea off the ground. Doesn't take a whole lot of work to get started. Just visit the Authentically Detroit page at ecn-detroit.org or call Sarah at 313-948-0344.
Bridge Detroit is your news and engagement platform that is telling the stories of Detroiters rooted by community priorities. Started in 2020 by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Stephen Henderson, the newsroom has already established its footing as the go-to source for hyper-local perspectives that ask the hard questions, brings accountability, and searches out real solutions. It's free to become a member of this award-winning news organization. Visit bridgedetroit.com today to sign up to receive the news delivered right to your inbox. Bridge Detroit, by Detroiters, for Detroiters.
For hot takes, youth homelessness, an invisible crisis in plain sight, providers say organizations like Covenant House Michigan serve an undercounted and often invisible part of the city's homeless population, young people. There are limited shelter beds and housing options for unhoused youth. A handful of groups in Metro Detroit provide services specifically geared toward youth, but say more resources are needed, right? Cynthia Adams says every day somebody's becoming homeless, and the atrocity of that is that there is not enough places to put people when they become homeless, especially when shelters are full. Cynthia works for Covenant House of Michigan. Last year, unaccompanied youth under 25 made up 9%, or roughly 500 of the more than 5,600 individuals in Detroit on the streets or in shelters. There were another 316 young parents and their children who experienced homelessness, according to the Homeless Action Network of HAN. I do want to caution that those numbers probably don't necessarily reflect the reality of youth homelessness in Detroit, and that actual number is likely higher because some youth may be couch surfing, bouncing from place to place, and unstably housed, but who don't identify themselves as homeless or make contact with the system. We've been talking to TJ at the end of last year, who didn't come in contact with the system but was de facto homeless, right? And so the article goes on to highlight some of the services that Covenant House provides, the Detroit Phoenix Center provides, advocate groups like the Homeless Action Network, and even the Ruth Ellis Center that just opened on Claremont that offers supportive housing that is completely full now, right? And they just opened, and that shelter is completely full. Donna, what say you?
Well, first of all, I love Courtney Smith from the Detroit Phoenix Center.
A classmate of mine.
Is she?
Yeah.
Yes, she's a blessing. And I saw her when she was being honored by Gail Perry Mason during her birthday celebration. I told her, Courtney, let's work together. I really admire her work in the community. I think she's doing great work, and we need more people who just decide, I'm going to try to fix this problem. Mm-hmm. I admire a lot of young people looking at that. I think when we look at youth homelessness, and we subdivide it into these categories, we have to understand that homelessness in families is a consequence of family instability. Whether it is poverty, whether it is lack of quality housing and stable housing. I'm doing a lot
and
of.
It's not mental illness.
It sometimes
that,
is.
But
just like, but there's mentally ill people who go to work every day.
Right.
There's mentally ill people who live inside homes and go do crazy things. When you say that mental illness looks like homelessness, or homelessness looks like mental illness, then it allows you to stigmatize and ignore the scale of the problem.
There you go.
And you know what? Listen, going back to our earlier conversation, as I'm doing a lot of historical research, just trying to prepare for this book I'm writing, because it's very important to me that I get it right. And so I'm reading a lot about Black Bottom when it was emptied out, and the failure and refusal of the mayor it was Mayor Jeffries to replace housing because of the community saying, we don't want new public housing. There was an opportunity, as they were doing all of the projects all through the city, to say, let's build up new public housing. We're talking about, again, 70 years ago. We still have not replaced housing that was lost in that incident. And the housing was lost was affordable. Now, you can say, well, the population has declined, but so has the availability of affordable housing. Then you had Hope 6 come in. Mm-hmm. If we're not serious about housing people, then you're going to find teenagers who are unhoused. You're going to find mothers who are unhoused. You're going to find men who are unhoused. And you're going to find fractured families where they're all unhoused, not living together in ways that they could if we took seriously the mandate to care for our people. And so it's a symptom of something very problematic. I know that there is also a lot of unresolved trauma in families. If you have a parent who has been traumatized, whether it's through foster care, losing your parents, losing whatever, you have fathers who have been traumatized, being able to show up and be effective with teenagers is not always there.
Yeah.
And so part of that stability means it's not mental illness, it is family stabilization. Where are the resources, whether it is from the public sector or from the private sector, to invest in organizations like mine just to help people get along with each other?
Yeah. Yeah. And to destigmatize homelessness. I think there's a tendency to look at the symptom, the person, and blame, especially young people for their own economic instability. And it doesn't make sense.
I think our government should feel stigmatized. I was reading that Karen Bass, mayor of LA, said, you know what, we have 40,000 homeless people, and this is a shame. And she actually said that out loud and said, I'm going to try to do something about it. She felt accountable.
A public emergency.
A public emergency. It's on you. You are in charge. What we do in terms of homelessness is we figure out, how do we get them off the streets? How do we hide them, charge them with vagrancy or loitering, or these laws that have been around since we started putting black folks out of housing, whatever. You're loitering. You don't have a place to be. So explain to me, the shelters are full. You don't have a home, but you can't stand here because you're a public nuisance being here. Your life, your existence is a public nuisance. We should be ashamed as a society that anybody's life is treated like a nuisance. You claim to believe in God, and you can't believe, if God makes no mistakes, then that person you're driving by, walking by, living on the streets is not a mistake. They are our responsibility, and we have to love them. And so I'm hopeful that I'm hearing more conversation about homelessness, and the more we talk about it, the more we complain about it, the Karen Basses of this world, hopefully we'll begin to see a shift in public policy. Again, we need more public housing in Detroit. We need more housing for people who don't have jobs and who cannot afford market rate housing. I was also reading something or listening to something on Jacobin, which is a socialist podcast yesterday, where they were talking about economics, and I was interested in what they were saying about it. And what they talked about was the fact that, we know that if housing is tethered to the market, is tethered to profit, homelessness is the consequence of that. And it's not just homeless people who are suffering right now. Housing has become expensive for working class people.
People are spending an exorbitant amount of their income on housing.
It is. And so the suffering caused by housing cost is so widespread. It's, unless you're rich or really, high income, you're probably or very possibly struggling with housing. Yeah. And certainly people your age.
Yeah. Last year, Detroit received $5.7 million in a grant from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to reduce youth homelessness. It includes dollars to make the homeless response system more accessible, permanent housing assistance, 24-hour crisis beds, and mental health support. HAND is overseeing that project, and it held listening sessions with service providers and youth who faced homelessness, and several themes emerged. Among them, the need for mentorship and making systems more accessible by not requiring youth to be in active crisis to get help. Shared living, host homes, and direct cash transfers were some other resources outside of limited government funding that people said would be helpful. So I'm really interested to see what comes out of this $5.7 million. That's nothing but a drop in the bucket. I know that some of the ARPA dollars that Detroit received is also supposed to go toward eliminating homelessness here in the city of Detroit. We're talking upwards of 5,000 folks who are experiencing homelessness, and that's just folks who have interacted with the system. And so I think we need to get a hold of this monstrosity of a problem and really figure out what we can do about it. I think we need to work with the Department of Health and Human Services. How many young people are aging out of foster care every year and have nowhere to go? Right. How many young people are being released from juvenile detention centers or jails and have nowhere to go?
And,
right?
And wouldn't it be
go ahead.
Wouldn't it be great if we took it seriously? We have, what if we said, what would it cost to figure out a way to make sure everybody has homes? Give me that number, and then you give me that $5 million up against the number that it would cost to actually fix the problem. And let me see the scale. You can throw $20 million at it and everybody gives applause. But if $20 million doesn't solve the problem and only help some of the young people, what happens to a homeless young person? A homeless young person is in crisis. If they have a child, that child is in crisis. That child born into crisis is born into stress, and that child may have trouble in school. That child having trouble in school may end up being an adult who struggles in many ways because we have decided to allow this problem to go unfixed. And then we end up paying for it.
And we've allowed people to campaign for elective offices locally in the state and at the national level without mentioning this crisis, without them having to answer for this crisis. It's unconscionable to me.
Well, imagine a world where the government says, I'm sorry, we can't afford to lock you up. Our prisons are full. Right? We have unlimited resources to lock people up.
That's brilliant.
We have unlimited resources to send people to war and to build these war machines and apparently to subsidize war in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. We have unlimited resources when it comes to things that we believe in. The reason we're not fixing homelessness is because as a nation, we don't really consider homelessness a problem.
Mm. Wow. It's really something, because we're in the next segment, we're going to talk about, the governor's priorities for her next term. And, one of the things that is glaring to me is that I see no mention of an affordable housing agenda, a homelessness eradication agenda, and some of the things that she talked about in her inauguration speech. So, I think now is the time whereby, we a lot of folks stumped and we got these people elected. We have a Democratic majority in the executive office and the state house and in the state Senate. I think now it is time to organize these folks to make sure that they pay attention to the issues. Sri Thanadar is headed to D.C. today.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And what is he charged with?
Well, I think it is not. Here's the thing. We know there's lobbyists who are paid and paying candidates to care about things. There are lobbies that do that. Where is the lobbyist for homelessness in our community? Where are the lobbies? Who's contributing to that? I pay money into that to have somebody fight on my behalf. So what gets paid for in our system, where you have organized efforts to build political support for something and not ask politicians to solve it. When lobbyists go to D.C., they are not asking politicians to come up with a solution. They are taking a solution and saying, here, I want you to do this. We can come up with solutions at the ground level, identify what they are, try to find people to champion these ideas, but we also should be raising money so that we can get people to change the law. That's how the insurance law changed. That's how so many laws get changed. Gun laws get changed by gun lobbies. But we keep on thinking that protests and mass actions are what gets
So how do we develop that political calculus, though, in people to, evolve their understanding around what organizing for change and legislating, this kind of equity and care looks like?
I have believed, and last year I closed out the year thinking that we needed to form a 501c4 organization at ECN. One of the things that happened is when the nonprofit law that says that nonprofits cannot lobby, you silence the voice of the people most inclined to act on behalf of the most vulnerable people in society. People are afraid to lobby. Well, the 501c4 legislation gives organizations the opportunity to form an arm that can lobby. It has to be separate. You have to use separate money and separate your time. But I think it's so important that we engage in the political process that has been designed for America, even as we agree that there's some flaws in that process, because that's the only process that we have. So that's going to be one of my goals, is trying to figure out how to do it. I talked to a friend of mine who runs a nonprofit organization. She formed a 501c4 last year, and she challenged me. She says, why don't you form a 501c4 for Black people? She's doing it for Latino people. And I said, you know what? That makes an absolute lot of sense, because when we're talking about homelessness, when we're talking about people living on the streets in Detroit, there are certainly people of all races, but the vast majority of that 5,000 people on the streets of Detroit are Black people. Mm-hmm. If you go to Los Angeles, look around, you're going to see people of all races, but you're going to see Black people overrepresented, underrepresented in having homes, underrepresented in having enough incomes to take care of themselves. So I think, that's what we have to do.
All right. If you have topics that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. So we're back from winter break. The beginning of the year is a time when people set their intentions and make resolutions for what they want to see happen in the next 365 days. And we here on Authentically Detroit are no different. So this episode, we're going to talk about what's in store for Michigan, Detroit, and of course, our podcast. Gretchen Whitmer rang in the new year, celebrating her second term as governor of Michigan. So let's start the discussion looking at some of her priorities in 2023. All right. So my colleague Laura Gibbons wrote the article based upon what the governor covered in her inauguration speech. She talked about repealing the right to work law. She talked about gun reform. She talked about trimming taxes for low income and elderly residents. She talked about codifying abortion rights. Talked about moving toward carbon neutrality. She talked about revisiting third grade reading law. Of course, she talked about fixing the roads. And she talked about transparency and ethics reform, specifically around FOIA laws. Right now, the legislature and the governor's office don't have to abide by FOIA requests. Right. When we request documents, they legally don't have to give them to us as journalists or members of the public, which is crazy to me. Donna, what do you think of these priorities?
It makes me want to be a lobbyist. No, I'm just joking. I mean, listen, these are important things. Right to work is, an important issue. The majority of the state is not unionized, but for those people who are, it certainly weakens the union voice. It was unnecessary. I think that people don't know what was there. I was looking at the gun reform laws, and I liked a lot of them. The red flag laws and the universal background checks. I would also like to change some of the open carry laws. I think that open carry presents a visible threat, and people should not be able to open carry weapons into schools, into the state capitol building and other places. It's offensive to me. Trimming taxes for low-income and elderly residents. I think that really the tax
on retirement.
I think we need to revise our tax code. Snyder messed it up. What he did was he cut business taxes on the backs of poor people, on the backs of senior citizens, on the back of working class people, and it doesn't make sense, but that's what government does. Again, they had good lobbyists. So I think that I'd like to see it investigated. Codifying abortion rights, that's cool. We're there. In terms of carbon neutrality, and this is the last piece before I, stop right now, but I think when we start talking about climate justice, a lot of times we have these very lofty ideas. Well, let's get, electric vehicles in every place in America.
The answer?
Well, can we upgrade our grid? We have a grid in most communities that are occupied by Black people in the state of Michigan that is aging and unstable and cannot even handle all of these new electrification initiatives. Let's say we decided that we were going to take the east side solar. Our grid can't handle it. Our grid is old. They keep saying it's the trees, and the trees may be an issue. That may be why we have these outages, but we also have an old grid. So I think, when we talk about that, there's not enough money for that. When you look at the fact that Michigan is behind the rest of the nation in our use of renewable energies, well behind Ohio. And I hate to say we're behind Ohio in anything. Anything, other than Cedar Point, that's like the high point. But we're behind most of the Midwest in so many things. We're still burning coal. We're still, we have ways that disincentivize conversion to solar. So they can't be, well, let's get these battery factories up and incentivize people to get these cars, or what you're going to see is the privileged people in our state leaning in on their privilege, but the problem isn't going to be solved. So I think electrification is a good thing, provided we are sourcing electricity from renewable energy as much as possible and lessening our dependence on fossil fuels, which we are not in Michigan. And I've been told or read somewhere that the cost of doing so is just so enormous. And I want to say this before I'm done. One of the challenges is we are not aspirational in our ideas here. The most aspirational thing that we've heard from a politician, she's going to fix all the damn roads, but that's it. We aren't saying house all the people, right? give everybody good electricity. Let's put solar on every roof. We talk about things in incremental ways and act like that's solving the problem. I think we just need to be more comprehensive. I think we have to be real with people and acknowledge that the solutions on hand aren't going to address climate change.
Yeah, and I think that, looking at these priorities, I'm looking at the needs that Detroiters have and how these can be connected. If we're talking about carbon neutrality and fighting against climate change, then I think we have to have a real conversation about flooding and infrastructure here in the city of Detroit and what that price tag looks like and how can the state help with that. But, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about this Democratic majority in Lansing and what that could mean for the city of Detroit. Keep it locked. Authentically Detroit. We'll be right back.
Bridge Detroit is your news and engagement platform that is telling the stories of Detroiters rooted by community priorities. Started in 2020 by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Stephen Henderson, the newsroom has already established its footing as the go-to source for hyper-local perspectives that ask the hard questions, brings accountability, and searches out real solutions. It's free to become a member of this award-winning news organization. Visit bridgedetroit.com today to sign up to receive the news delivered right to your inbox. Bridge Detroit, by Detroiters, for Detroiters.
Have you always dreamed of being on the airwaves? Well, the Detroit Eastside Engaged Podcast Network, or DEEP for short, is here to make that dream a reality. Located inside the Stoudemire, the DEEP Network offers studio space and production staff to help get your podcast idea off the ground. Doesn't take a whole lot of work to get started. Just visit the Authentically Detroit page at ecn-detroit.org or call Sarah at 313-948-0344.
And we are back. So we were just talking about the governor's priorities that she laid out in her second inauguration address. One of the things that I think has a lot of people optimistic and excited is that Democrats have control of Lansing, the state house, the governor's office, and the state senate. Detroiter Joe Tate, right, is the Speaker of the House, who's going to control what legislation comes to the floor and what gets debated and heard. We also know and understand that this past election was a referendum on this new redistricting process that we went through last year and that we talked about habitually on this show with Sergio Beltran out of Bridge, Michigan. Looking at what the governor has said yesterday and what the needs are in Detroit, are we optimistic that we're going to be able to get some things done in the city that we've been talking about for a long time? Things like residency, things like revenue sharing, right? Things like infrastructure investment, things like automotive insurance. I don't know about you. I know we got that law change, but people are still disproportionately underwater in automotive insurance here in the city of Detroit. What say you?
Well, can I say something real quickly?
Yeah.
So yesterday I was reading on Twitter that for the first time ever, in the top 7 positions in the state, there's not a white man.
You know what? I actually
positions.
resent. Are you talking about the tweet that Child Live and Good
yes,
made?
he did.
I resent that tweet, and I do not like the framing. You
know what? He said, listen, and he named all the women and the black men. I was like, where are all the sisters? Okay, you know what? We still aren't represented. Black women still aren't represented. If you want to make that kind of granular thing, but it's also the first time in recent history that all 7 of them are also Democrats. And so we have definitely turned a tide in some ways in this state. But I think people get overly optimistic about what thin majorities can do, especially because Democrats don't always act with the same unity of purpose as Republicans. Republicans will all vote, as a block. Democrats will be like, well, you know what?
You have
but at the state level, there were a couple people who were elected who flipped a seat and said, well, my district doesn't want me to go too far, and so I'm going to sort of hold out on some of these bigger issues. I think that it's going to take more than getting them there. I think that there has to be some narrative building. You're big on narrative, Orlando.
Absolutely.
You understand the power of that, right? Mm-hmm. We have to build the narratives. We have to help to change public opinion. And so we're not just about us versus them, but do people in the state of Michigan believe, for example, that downtown development authorities are taking up too much money? And if so, do residents want to see that? Because you're going to get the counter argument. They're going to say, oh, you're going to run businesses out of the state. No new development is going to come down. If you have a vision that you're trying to sell, and that brings me back to lobbies. I guess I'm a one-trick pony today, but I'll stay on the same topic. No, I think that we really have to build some narratives, and it's not just that. It's Bridge Michigan is helping to build narratives, and I think we need to enlist partners in other parts of the state to help educate people. Why do we want these things? And then once we educate people, why do we want these things? I think we also have to help address some of the myths about some of the injustices. Like there's people in Upper Michigan who believe every black person has a college education because they went to college free or whatever. And it's such a ridiculous belief system.
That's so ridiculous.
But they're listening to the type of press that is miseducating them and helping to stoke resentments. And so I think if we're going to see change, we've got to support the people who are elected, who are in these fragile districts, by helping to undergird some of the arguments that we want them to make. It's not going to be automatic. But I do think that there's going to be change. I do think that when you have people in charge, they set the agenda, they have the bully pulpit, and they have the ability to act on behalf of the nation. I think Joe Tate is an excellent example. I understand that there is a woman who's on leading the state Senate. I'd hoped it would be Stephanie Chang, but I guess I couldn't get everything I wanted this time. But, I think that we'll see.
We're not going to give Donna what she wants.
No, I mean, they're not going to give them what they want. It's not just me. I think, we're looking for, as Detroiters, representation at those tables.
Yeah.
But I think, I think we do have the possibility, first of all, we're not going to have a lot of bad legislation, okay? We'll have some bad legislation, but we're not going to have as much bad legislation the governor has to veto because it's not going to make it out of committee. Mm-hmm. That's a win in and of itself.
Yeah.
Secondly, we're not going to be playing defense. We're going to be on the offense.
Yeah.
But again, I think, it's going to be some of these larger issues that are already widely supported by Democrats. Some of the things we want to see in Detroit and we know we need to see, it's going to be a tough road, and we're going to have to keep on working to support our elected officials.
Yeah, I think that absent the intentionality to have legislation that benefits Detroiters, we will continue to have more of the same. And I think that, with these new districts, the politicians that are representing these districts are more fragile and at risk for being unseated than before. These districts, these state districts are sort of drawn, all over the place, right? With, literally cutting blocks and things in half.
Right.
And so towing this line of making sure that you represent the interests of your entire constituency, that also includes Detroit, is something that will be interesting to watch.
Well, I think, the reality is that, we're all breathing some pretty bad air. We're all dealing with some of the same stuff.
There's some shared stuff.
Our
Absolutely.
grid isn't good for anybody. I think that we are so focused on what divides us that we aren't looking at some of the shared challenges that we face.
But do other communities care about the sum of us? I'm thinking about, Heather McGee.
I care about me, right? And you care about you. I mean, we all care about our self-interest.
Yeah.
And we vote based on our self-interest.
But also, we care about our self-interest to the extent where we want to benefit. But I think racism works differently. I think racism works. It's like, okay, even if this does benefit me, it also benefits you, and I don't like that.
I get that, and I agree that can be the case. I also think that people don't always even understand what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
I know I've got emphysema, but I don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I know that I'm dealing with some things, but I don't know why. I need to be educated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just like we're doing in the city of Detroit, we could do a better job really trying to help people understand where our interests intersect. We were able to do that in Detroit in the 1920s. That's how Judge Murphy became the chief judge of the Recorder's Court, was because Detroiters, black, white, immigrant, came together and said, you know what, we don't like what Henry Ford and his group are trying to bring forward in terms of criminal justice. If we had power in the 1920s, I can't believe we can't have power now, because racism is certainly not worse now than it was then. But when you have people understanding their shared interests, when you help to deconstruct some of the lies that people have been fed, that's how you're going to win if you're a black candidate. And there's in other parts of the nation, you've seen black candidates be able to win, and not just Republicans, but not just Herschel Walkers, but black candidates who actually bring skills and bring vision, be able to win in majority white districts because they're able to speak to issues they see in common. And by the way, that's what President Obama did. And nobody thought he could be president.
Yeah.
And he went to towns and he said, we got the same issues, and he was able to help people. Have you read his book?
His memoir? No,
his memoir.
I did not read it.
In his memoir, he goes into great detail about how he was going from one town to the other.
He went in great detail about everything. Have you seen how thick that thing is?
I've read 1/3 of it. It's been a year, but the 1/3 was really good. But I'm going to finish it. But I'm just saying, if you really want to understand, anybody who's trying to understand and run for office, I would read that book.
Well, you're talking about what it takes to mount successful campaigns and to get legislation passed, and that is story, right? And the ability to go out and cascade said story. And what story helps people do is see the humanity in others that we don't always get to see absent the story.
So, Orlando, you said there were 3 qualities. You said there were 2, and I added a third to make a good interview. What were they again?
An insatiable curiosity and listening.
An insatiable curiosity, listening, and I said extreme interest in other people. I think that's what makes a great candidate too. I think that listening and curiosity and finding out what people need and want, not going in there with solutions. I think that's what people would do. So I have promised myself and everybody who knows me I will never run for elective office, but I definitely want to help people who do want to run.
You're always
understand.
asked.
I want to help people who do want to run understand how to be successful because, I am a political science. You studied journalism. I studied political science. And so this has been something I've been looking at for a while and just documenting and reading. And I just hate to see people go in there thinking, if I just go in there and I'm cooler than other people, I'm going to win. It's not going to help anymore. And right now in Detroit, if you're a black person in Detroit whose family members were elected to something and you want your name recognition account, it won't in places where your family names aren't known.
And cities change.
That's right.
Cities aren't cities if they aren't changing. And so cities change, perspectives change, and affinity changes. We don't care about your last name that much no more, depending on who you are.
In fact, we may not trust you if you have a last name that we recognize.
There is that. Let's talk a little bit about our baby that is Authentically Detroit. We are here at the beginning of the year. What are we hoping for? What are we hoping to do in 2023? What are we hoping to bring our listeners this year?
We talked about towards the end of last year storytelling. And I think there's some narratives that we can help address and be very intentional about it. I'm very interested in following up on a couple things we talked about last year off camera or off mic. And one of them was homelessness and what's happening with homeless people in our city, what happened after COVID-19, and how are they being cared for. The second thing that we talked about was the criminal justice system with the focus on who are these judges we elect. It's always the weakest part of my voting process. I was sitting there and I had no clue how to vote for people. And then, listen, there was one lady, I'm not going to name her, but I probably voted for her because she has a black name and that's all I know. And she said something on Facebook yesterday that was so incredibly disrespectful to poor people. And I was like, can I take that vote back? I don't know if I voted for her, but obviously picking the black person is not the winning thing. I think we don't have a system for knowing who judges are and holding them accountable. So I think that if we could have a couple long form stories where we bring in guests and we become more educated and we educate more people, that's good. And there's a third thing.
Dig deep.
And that is, I've been really fascinated by just doing a lot of historical research. And I think it's important that we continue to push knowledge on people, help people understand the history of America, to help people understand the history of black people, because we don't learn our history in school. We don't even learn it in college. And a lot of times people don't read books that document things. I'm still learning things I probably should have known in childhood and would have known if I came from the kind of place whose history the kind of people whose history gets documented. So I want to continue sharing information as I come upon it.
I mean, you're one of our griots. And I always say this, that the griot is urgent. The passing down of learned history, custom, culture, it is so important toward, I believe, building a bench of the next generation of practitioners and politicians and folks who will show up in community development and in the social work programs. All of that's important. You know, one of the things that Youth on the Edge of Greatness did for me was it established and helped to raise my consciousness around the political, specifically the Black political power structure here in the city of Detroit, and having access to all of those people and going to KMIC and, you know, talking to folks from the Shrine, you know, like I was exposed. We had this village, and it's scary that young folks are missing that piece of education, that wraparound service. And I think that's why nonprofits like ECN and DHDC and, you know, so many amazing community development organizations here in the city of Detroit who fill that gap are so important and need to stay functioning and funded to continue to offer those services. Had it not been for Warren Connor, I don't know. I knew who all of my elected officials were since I've been 10 years old, right? I can name every city council person at 10 years old, mayor, right? I was taught.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the amazing thing is that all of our people have an enormous ability to learn and understand things. I think we have to believe in the capacity of people who have more knowledge, making better decisions and understanding things. We have a way of being very divisive, and these people don't this and these people don't that. But, you know, I really want to represent the people that other people have written off and help bring those people to the table. The people at the table don't need me. But it's the people who are written off who really need a voice, who really need representation, who really need understanding. And so I also hope that we reach more audiences, that we reach more of the people who this podcast was actually intended to reach.
Yeah. And
so,
you can expect that.
And no offense, any listener, we love you. We love you. We just want to make sure that people who live in the neighborhoods of Detroit are also listening. Orlando, what is your vision?
Really what you said. I mean, I think you daylighted some of the visioning conversations that we've been having leading up to this year. You know, I would just drill down and say that you can expect us to continue to be candid and to continue to bring our hearts to the issues that matter to you and that matter to us. You can expect us to bring power brokers on this show and rigorously question them, right? You can expect us to continue to advocate for equity, and you can expect us to continue to be curious. You can expect us to continue to provide a platform for young people and their voices and their perspectives to become mainstream, right? Young people are not 100% of our population, but they are 100% of our future. And so when I look at lists like the advisory committee for this I-375 piece, you know, I don't see young people. I don't see young people being considered. I don't see young people's voices and perspectives being implemented. And that is problematic if we are trying to build a city for the future. And so I think we're going to be unrelenting with that. And I'm excited.
Yeah, me too.
I'm excited. You got any shout outs before we head out?
I do. I want to shout you out, Orlando, and I want to shout out Bridge Detroit. I feel like when I reflected on some of the good things last year, I want to shout out Bridge Detroit for bringing real news. And, you know, I've been looking at the history of news and the importance of news in our community. And even the way from the very beginning, one of the newspapers, I'm not going to mention it, was used to help suppress unionism and other things in our community. People have usurped our voice. And so I'm just really proud of Bridge Detroit for being the kind of organization that makes sure that you try to get at the truth and educate us. And I want to commend you for just being a great co-host. Last year was really difficult for me, and you were very important in terms of me feeling supported and healing.
Yeah. But you know what? I think going beyond being a good co-host to you, I think that's easy when we are good friends to each other. Yeah. Because I think that is what comes first. And so I'm excited about this year. Shout out to you for, you know, still being able to show up. I don't know how, but you did. And you coming into this realization and resolving that, this year you're going to choose you, and you're going to turn the page and live in the present and live in the future. I think that is an amazing resolve. I'm excited for what that looks like for you, and I'm excited to walk out this journey with you. We started this thing in 2019, and here we are in 2023. I don't think we thought that we would be here.
Certainly not at WDET
not
Studios.
Not at WDET Studios, but God is amazing, y'all. So thank you so much for listening. We want you to keep listening, and we want you to share. We want you to like, and we want you to subscribe. And as always, we'll see you same time next week. We thank you so much for listening. We want you to catch the wave.